Okay, hello everyone. So we actually are in need of a little extra time to help set up epicness. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to show you the CDRomatron interview a little bit early. So be sure to enjoy that, and we'll be right back with The Legend of Spyro done by Epicness. Okay, and welcome back everyone to Spyrothon 8. Today I am joined in with an interview with CDRomatron, known as Mike to many. Mike, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me along.
Thanks for running with us this weekend. I want to start by talking about your Season of Ice run. The estimate is pretty long, sitting at around just 2 hours. Uh, I mean, as us fellow handheld runners know, Season of Ice can run a little bit long, but for a lot of people, that is pretty insane. Um, what are you expecting to use to play this game this weekend? And is that original hardware?
So traditionally, I use original hardware when it comes to running the Game Boy Advance titles. I've got two main options, one of which has become a lot more accessible over the years, being the Game Boy Player and Game Boy interface, which is a way of playing that through a GameCube using a relatively easy to get add-on and third-party software to make it run just as well as it would have on the original Game Boy. I've also got the option of a DS with capture card. However, I am opting for emulator for this run, primarily for comfort, as it'll allow me to use a controller which is a bit more comfortable for my hands, as well as providing a good quality video experience for the audience.
So then for a period of time, you were running on original hardware?
Yeah, so depending on what's currently accessible with my setup, due to my living arrangements, sometimes I don't have full access to where my computer is, and sometimes it's a little hard to go and plug stuff in and sit right next to it. So it can vary from place to place. But my preferred setup is on the Game Boy Player because it allows me to use a GameCube controller, and I find
Mhm.
that relatively comfortable.
Do you find that when you're switching between the different consoles, it's a challenge for you to, have the same performance level in your speedruns?
I don't find the variance in controllers too much. Luckily, with the Game Boy, because it's a relatively simple system, somewhat on par with the Super Nintendo, uh, there's not always too much going on, and the control schemes are usually relatively simple, with only two face buttons, a D-pad, and the triggers, meaning it doesn't take too long to adapt from controller to controller, which is a really nice experience.
Yeah, that is nice, and it is nice that you're able to keep good health in your hands while running for 2 hours on that kind of, console. So speaking of estimates, one of the other runs you'll be doing together is a duofecta with RDA, and that is significantly shorter, clocking in at around 5 minutes. What can we expect to see there?
So for the Duo effect, we're running a beat the game with cheats for both Season of Ice and Season of Flame. We've found numerous shortcuts, although we can unlock things right at the start of the game using the cheat codes for many power-ups that Spyro players would be familiar with, such as warping to levels from the Atlas. We unlock the ability to warp to any level from the Atlas right at the get-go in both games. However, we use a number of skips to avoid a number of mandatory story triggers in both the games, which allows us to get to both Grendor and Ripto pretty quickly, which allows us to beat both of the games in record time.
Awesome. So that probably will be a lot more of a chaotic run, right?
It's a very chaotic run, especially with the boss skips. With Grendor, it's very possible to set them up to be in an infinite damage loop. And with Ripto, there's a very quick kill you can perform. So it's going to be coming along to who makes the least mistakes in the boss fights, and will either of us get the perfect run? That's the thing to be looking out for.
All right. Well, I'm excited to see that. Um, Speaking of our good friend RDA, 2 years ago in Spyrothon 6, I had a chance to interview him about Season of Flame, which is a run he will be playing in this marathon as well. Um, Tell us a little bit about Season of Ice and the differences that we could see between Season of Flame and Season of Ice.
So Season of Ice is actually pretty unique, just as amongst the whole Spyro series as a whole. It's one of the only games which requires almost 100% completion for the any percent run. In this case, although gems do not matter, aside from unlocking Sparks levels, we do need to get all 100 fairies to beat the game, which is all of the fairies, which means we need to collect all of them in every level, which means similar to Spyro 3, you need to complete the end of level objectives, but also completing the 5 other objectives in every level. It's also very punishing in that a few of the objectives will restart from a death, as there are no Zoe checkpoints throughout any of the levels, meaning every level has I would call them burnables, so something that you need to flame all of in a level, and if you die once, they will all respawn, meaning you've got to follow that route again, which can make it very punishing.
Yeah, that is something I think every Season of Ice runner can relate to in terms of it's so much more punishing than the other games. Is there a reason why you prefer that GBA game over some of the other ones, and why you chose to submit that to this particular marathon?
Season of Ice, I decided to submit was primarily due to the potential that I find that game has. Due to its difficulty, it's definitely become the less popular game to run amongst the handheld Spyro community and the Spyro community as a whole. And because of that, I feel like the game has a decent amount of potential. I'm sure there's going to be some stuff in the game which we just haven't found yet. For example, we discovered a few tricks such as upward warps, being able to gain infinite flight off a flutter, and as well as various cutscene skips through the cheats percent. And I think through showcasing the run and maybe getting more people interested, we could probably find a few more things in that run. And if we ever find out how to break that minimum requirement of the 99 fairies, this run could be broken wide open.
And hopefully one day we will be able to find that. But for now, we're sitting at 100 fairies and around an hour and a half, 2 hours of playtime. So another run that you have in this event is The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning. Typically, when we hear that name, we think of the console version, but you're actually going to be running it on the handheld version. Do you know of the major differences between these games, and is there a particular reason why you opt to play the handheld over the console version?
So I've had a fascination with Game Boy Advance titles for pretty much my entire duration of speedrunning. I started speedrunning back in 2014 with the Crash Game Boy Advance games. And from there, it kind of just grew into a niche I was able to develop as I got quite invested in the hardware and collecting the games and that side of it, which was quite nice. And one challenge I set myself at some point was learning all of the Spyro Game Boy games. And part of that was A New Beginning, which was a surprisingly deep experience. I played Spyro the Eternal Night on Game Boy Advance before I played A New Beginning, which is a far more refined game and did what A New Beginning was trying to do very well. A New Beginning is definitely some interesting building blocks, although it might fall short on some things game mechanics-wise. It provides a lot of variety in terms of the gameplay that is there, mixing up a decent portion of platforming and combat.
So you talk a lot about how you started with Crash GBA games, and that's kind of where you really started with speedrunning. Um, a lot of people consider the handheld games harder to get into in general. I know I was there once. How was your experience in terms of the hardware, setting that up, and just getting into the games in general?
Mhm. So as for the hardware requirements for handheld games, they're getting only easier as time goes on. In terms of being able to emulate the games, they are getting easier and easier. Like I said, they're on par with Super Nintendo titles, so they're becoming easier and easier to run. And as well as the Game Boy Player accessory and Game Boy video and GameCube video output, those are just getting cheaper and more accessible as time goes on as well, which has been a really nice thing to see. As for getting into the games gameplay wise, Uh, they are surprisingly accessible, especially with Season and Ice and Flame. They primarily just follow a standard route. You can watch most of the runs and follow along. I believe RDA has a really good tutorial for Season of Flame. Attack of the Rhinox has only become easier over time with a new skip that was discovered, which allowed us to skip doing one of the hardest skips in the game. There's Spyro Orange, also known as Fusion, which has some major skips, which allows us to skip pretty much everything that was challenging about the game. And then you've got A New Beginning, which is probably what's ended up being one of the hardest games out of the handheld series, and The Eternal Night, which is an extremely fun but rewarding platform.
All right. So if any of that sounds interesting to you out there, Mike is going to be running a lot of different GBA games this event. He has Season of Ice any percent. He's going to do a duofecta of Beat the Game with Season of Ice and Season of Flame. And also he's going to be running The Legend of Spyro New Beginning on Game Boy Advance. So be sure to tune in for those runs. It's going to be a great time. I think all the GBA games are hidden gems. So thank you, Mike, for joining us today. And we'll see you more this weekend.
All right. Thanks for having me. Enjoy Spyrothon.